All right. On June 10th, 2023, I was involved in a debate with John Crawford, a proponent of free grace theology. We were discussing the subject of baptism, and I was accused of a negative inference fallacy. And that's what I want to talk about because it's been a year and a half, and I spent a lot of time after the debate wondering, well, what is this fallacy? Where does it come from? And so on and so forth. So give me just a minute. Okay, good. I'll be able to share my screen so we can walk through some of these notes. All right, so I found out that a lot of people are going to be citing .questions.org when it comes to the negative inference fallacy. Now, this was just a research I did looking through the internet, trying to find out where does this come from. I picked up a logic textbook at first, and I thought, this obviously has to be some sort of philosophical thing. Well, it's not a formal logical fallacy. So that was causing me to have some red flags in my mind. So gotquestions.org, we're talking about Matt Slick, Carm, and all that. Quotation is, if a statement is true, we cannot assume that all negations or opposites of that statement are also true. Dr. Linda Smallwood, and in some references, others will refer to her as Dr. Linda Johnson. I don't know at what point her name changed, but gives that same definition from gotquestions.org, adds the expression whether expressed or not. Timothy Sparks also cites this doctor and also cites Dixon, who I'll talk about in a moment. There's a discussion on Christianity Stack Exchange, and it gives the pretty much the same definition, but then even accuses Matt Slick of the fallacy in his writing on limited atonement, which we'll discuss to some extent in a minute. But he says in that again, and there's discussion boards and different things. I mean, that's not necessarily a scholarly resource, but there is some good information on there. He goes into detail and says that Jesus said in John 10:15 that he laid his life down for his sheep. Furthermore, in John 10:26, Jesus said that the people did not believe because they are not his sheep. The argument goes that if Jesus lays his life down for the sheep, and there are people who were not his sheep, then he did not lay his life down for those who are not his sheep. So moving forward, I asked gotquestions.org, okay, you have the quotation in the article. What is the source of this? And I got an answer from Jeff from the staff, and I have the email to this day. Likewise, I'm not sure where the quotation comes or if it's merely placed in quotes to set it off from the rest of the sentence. Nor do I see that the negative inference fallacy is widely recognized as its own unique form of logical error. Interestingly, the only places I've seen that specific phrase used are in discussions of theology, especially baptism and salvation. Moving on, there's another discussion board where the negative inference fallacy is given as the proof of a proposition does not disprove its converse, and that may very well be. There's a sermon or a Bible study of some sort from Cedarville Community Church. The negative inference fallacy to argue Tim loves his family, therefore he does not love his non-family. That's just an example. That's not necessarily defining it, but those kind of analogies and examples are common. People can't seem to decide what kind of fallacy a negative inference fallacy is. Al Maxey, at different points, says it's a non sequitur or a subset denying the antecedent. John Davenant gives examples of both affirming the disjunct and denying the antecedent when he's speaking of the negative inference fallacy. Um, some people believe it's like an illicit negative, which only applies to categorical syllogisms. Finally, I found Paul S. Dixon, who cited Carson as far as negative inference fallacy goes. And it turns out that in one of Maxey's articles or what he writes, he cites Dixon as well. So if you're going to go back to what the negative inference fallacy is, D.A. Carson wrote a book in 1984 called Exegetical Fallacies. And again, what did he mean by that? This is his example. All Orthodox Jews believe in Moses. Mr. Smith is not an Orthodox Jew, therefore, Mr. Smith does not believe in Moses. That's important because one, it's a categorical syllogism. Two, we can see why this is not a good argument. We're saying all Orthodox Jews believe in Moses. Since Mr. Smith is not an Orthodox Jew, we can conclude that he does not believe in Moses, but that's not a logical and a good argument, and you should not reach the conclusion that way. Mr. Smith can clearly be a Christian or even a member of another religion and believe in Moses. So, now again, to be clear, if the first statement was only Orthodox Jews believe in Moses, then you would reach the proper conclusion. So there's something to be said about that. So let's go to Mark 16:16 and just the first half of Mark 16. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. Okay. So I put that in formal logical form. F stands for belief because I can't have believe and baptize. I can't have two B's. So F stands for belief or faith, a personal faith. B stands for baptism, and S stands for saved. If one believes and is baptized, they will be saved. If F and B, then S. Now we can take that statement and we can flip it around by transposition. If one is not saved, then one has not believed and been baptized. So if not S, then not the conjunction of F and B. Now we can simplify that in a way by De Morgan's theorem. I've only ever read of De Morgan's theorem in the writings of Thomas B. Warren. And I mean, it's obviously in logical textbooks and things, but it's not something that people use all that often. But I was familiar with it. So if we take what we've already taken, if not S, then not F and B, we can modify that. If one is not saved, one either has not believed or has not been baptized. So it is not wrong to say one is not saved if one has not been baptized, or one is not saved if one does not believe. And that's all I was really going to bring out and say about that. So it's interesting how the sort of thing uh, took off and came about. Um, I don't have anything else I think to say about that, to be honest. Just wanted everyone to know um, there's nothing wrong with saying that belief and baptism are both necessary for salvation. If we especially look at the grammar, the aorist participles that come before the future tense verb, um, there's no reason to deny that. I've actually discussed this with members of the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, and I was getting different answers from them. Some were saying, no, the text is saying the baptism is not necessary. Others are saying, no, um, it's saying baptism is necessary, but it's a spiritual baptism. And I questioned them on that. I said, well, what is it actually saying? Is it saying this baptism is necessary or it's not necessary? And does it just depend on which baptism? And that's not something you can build your case on. That opens up another discussion, but I just wanted to address the material I've had. And I've been sitting on this for a little while, and I had people ask me about it. And I did a short about it, but I wanted to give you the full gamut of how all these definitions and allusions to it on the internet are there's this weird flow chart of how these definitions came about and how they all seem to be citing one another, and yet, um, if you trace it back to gotquestions.org, then the citation is not even a good definition, and it's not based on anything. Um, and I don't think it applies to the hypothetical syllogism that I came up with, um, when it comes to Mark 16. So there's further discussion to be had on this point, and I should have opened by saying I recognize now, and I've studied a bit more, the arguments about Mark 16, whether it's in Scripture or not, and I'm amenable to that, and I don't necessarily depend on Mark 16 to prove my point. I've been accused of that in the past. But regardless of whether Mark 16 is Scripture or not, um, what the text is saying is what the text is saying. And if we are alluding to, if we do believe it's scripture, then we're right to say belief and baptism are both necessary for salvation, both required for salvation, both come before salvation. And there's no reason to deny that or come away from that unless one becomes convinced that it's not from scripture. But then we would look elsewhere to prove the case. I'll end it there. Everyone have a good day and God bless.